Okay, we're in our Sample Rock Castle construction file in our QuickBooks desktop program. And one of the things I wanted to say about items real quick, as it will be readily apparent when we actually start working with them, is that items are connected to our accounts, which if you remember from our chart of accounts, I'm going to go ahead and open that back up real quick, are all these accounts that work behind the scenes in our QuickBooks program to record all of the transactions, to include our expenses, our income, our cost of goods sold, our equity, our liabilities, and our assets. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of our chart of accounts real quick. And as you can see, when we start working with the items, is that our items are tied to our accounts to record these transactions in what we call our standard QuickBooks workflow. That would be using our bills, our invoices, our estimates if you've got those enabled, sales orders if you've got those enabled, purchase orders if you've got those enabled, and also to create sales receipts. So our items are tied to those accounts in our chart of accounts to record those. Items also allowed us to record products we buy and sell using the same item. So this ability to use the double-sided accounts makes the invoicing and billing capabilities of QuickBooks very powerful. So instead of talking about it, let's see how all this works. So we're going to go over here to the lists area on our menu bar. We're going to click on that, and then our drop down will open, and then we just go down to items list, and that will open that up. Let's try that again so you can see what I just did. I just closed that out so we could do it again. We're going to go to our menu bar, go to our lists menu item, and then we're going to scroll down and then open up our items list, and that will open up our items list. And as you can see in our sample file, they have a good bit of items listed, and being that they're a construction company, they've got all sorts of types of items that they have listed. Now these items work to build our invoices, our bills, whatever type of documentation we need to record any sales or purchases of products. The first item that we're going to talk about, the first item type we're going to talk about is the service type. Now before we actually go into and look at any of these, I always recommend that people add a chart of an account listing to this list here. So in order to do that, you just hover over any of the heading items. It doesn't matter which one. Use your mouse to right click, and then we're going to go down here to customize columns. What that does is it opens up the customized columns for the items list. We want to scroll down and look and add this cost of goods sold account. When you do that, when you click on that, you're going to click on add, and what that does is it adds it to the bottom. But what we want to do is we want to move it up so it's right behind or right underneath this account column listing here. So when we do that, you'll see it open up right alongside of it. Now there's really nothing in this purchase date column. It's just taking up empty real estate that we need for other stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it and remove it. So when I click on OK, it's going to affect all those changes. So let's go ahead and do that, and you'll see what I'm talking about. 1, 2, 3. All right. And as you can see, we got rid of that purchase date column. And so now we have more room to view the names and the description and the type. And then we can even also adjust by grabbing with our left mouse button and dragging. And that's going to be really helpful because we're going to need to look at this cost of goods sold column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to widen that out a little bit. And as you can see, as I scroll back up to the top, we have several accounts or several items here that do not have a cost of goods account assigned to them, but several do. And we'll talk about those. Like I said, we're going to talk about the different item types, and we're going to first talk about the service types. Your service types are for any services that you provide, and you want to link those to the particular income account that has to do with that. So I'm going to widen that up a little bit, and I'm also going to squeeze this up a little bit so you can see some of these items here, or some of these accounts here, are subcategorized. So you have construction income, and then under construction income you have design income, and then you have some subcontracted labor income and things like that. So first of all, I want to double click on this blueprint changes, which is a service type. When you double click on that, you can see how it's set up. You see that you've got the name here, and if you've got any units of measure enabled, you can add those here. But basically what you do with that is if you want to make it a sub-item of something, you can do that when you set it up. Otherwise, you can put a rate in there of what you would expect to receive for that if you want to. Otherwise, you can just leave it blank, and if it varies, you can always update that in your invoices or bills or whatever you use for that. And you can see that the account that we have that is the construction income, design income, just like it showed on the front. So I just wanted you to see that, so that way you can see how that particular item is set up. Since we do not use this in assemblies, or it's not performed by a subcontractor or partner, it's what we call a one-sided item. Basically, it's used to record any income for this particular item type. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out. Okay. That brings us back to our items list. Now, what I talked about earlier is that you can use items in invoices and in bills. If you purchase or sell something, you can use the same item type. For example, here we have subcontracted services. Say like if you want to, and let me wind this out a little bit so you can see, we have underneath the item type or the item name, we have subs as a major category, and then under that we have subcategorized under subs as carpet, drywall, ductwork, and all that kind of thing. So let's look at our install carpeting subcategory under the subs item. So I'm just going to double click on that, and you can see a major difference, well actually a couple of major differences. In the item that we had selected before, the blueprint, we did not have it subcategorized under a sub-item. So if you click on the list arrow here, you can see if you wanted to change that, you could, but right now we have it under the subcontracted services main category for this, and that's where we want it. The major difference other than that is that we have a checkbox here that says this service is used in assemblies or is performed by a subcontractor or a partner. So when you have a check mark down here, then you have an additional area that pops up where you can go ahead and you can input the cost of the item. Say like if you pay this person $25 an hour for that, you can put that figure right in there. And then you also can tie it to an expense account, which in this instance, it's going to be job expenses is the main category, and the subcontractor category, and this is all mapped to a cost of goods sold account. And then if you have a preferred vendor that you use for that, you can also put that in there, but you don't have to do that. Along with, if you have a sales price that you want to put in there, say like you charge the customer $100 an hour or something, or $50 an hour for that, you can put that in there. Otherwise, you can just leave it blank, and if it varies depending on the customer or the job, then you can leave that blank and insert that yourself. This also gives you, and I forgot to mention this before, but this also gives you an opportunity to enter whether this is a taxable or non-taxable item, and for most of us, services are a non-taxable item. But if you wanted to change that to taxable sales, then you can do that. And I understand in some states that like Washington State, and I think New Mexico is another one. Don't quote me on that, but from what I understand, those they do tax on certain services that they provide. Then you can also tie this to an income account, which is what we've done here. You can look under here. Oh, we've got the main heading of construction income, and then the subcategory is subcontracted labor income. So we can actually use this one item on purchases of subcontracted labor, and we can also use this to record our income from any carpet installations that we do for any of our customers and that kind of thing. So isn't that kind of neat? And this is where the power of using the double-sided items comes in. Now let's say you've got an item here that you know needs to be double-sided, but it's not. It's very easy to fix. Like for instance, we've got this installation right here. Say our installation labor is all subcontracted out. It's just so easy to fix. So we're going to double click on that. And for right now, you can see it's set up as a one-sided item just to record the income that we earn on that. And then the rate that we charge for that is $35 an hour, and it's a non-taxable item. We don't have it listed on any parent category, but we're going to change that in a minute. So watch what happens when I click on this box right here. This service is used in assemblies or is performed by a subcontractor or partner. So once we do that, notice that the cost area opens up, and we're going to assign an expense account to this as well as a sub item. First, let's go ahead and assign the sub item. Sub item for this will be, we're going to go ahead and do this under subs, kind of keep it all straight. And then the expense account that we'll use for this, we just got to find our cost of goods sold. And let's call it, it's going to be job expense subcontractors. Let's just use that for simplicity. And we're not going to choose a preferred vendor. We could if we wanted to. But let's say the cost of this that we pay our subcontractor is $25 an hour. So before I click on the changes here, you'll see that our cost to our subcontractor is $25, but we changed the sales price that we sell is $35. Let's say we wanted to increase that to $50. So that's what's going to show up on our invoicing of our customer, but when we send out our bill and things like that, then it's going to show the $25. So let's go ahead and click on OK, and that'll update everything. And as you can see now, it's saying you're changing an account associated with this item. All future transactions with this item will use this new account. Would you like to also update existing transactions? You have to be very careful when you do this because you don't want to update anything that has already been done in a prior period. So in most cases, you just want to go ahead and just have your changes from this point forward. So we're going to do no to that. And then notice what happened. That item moved from where it was up here. It moved underneath our main heading, our main item. And then the sub item moved. And we have it set up as a double-sided item, just like all the other ones that are here. So that's how you do that. And let me widen this out a little bit so we can see the list again. So that's how you go ahead and make a double-sided item. The next item we're going to talk about is an inventory part. Now we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on inventory parts, but if you track inventory in QuickBooks, and that's a whole nother lesson altogether, then you need to set those up so that you can go ahead and make sure that your inventory is accurate and matches to, and you'll have to do physical counts periodically to make sure that the inventory accounts in QuickBooks matches your physical inventory. But for now, let's see how this inventory part is set up. So I'm going to double click on that and you'll see there's an extra area down here at the bottom. Now when you're setting up an inventory part, For instance, this one is called cabinet pulls, and it's a sub item of cabinets, and I'll show you how that looks in here. So we've got that right here so that you can see it. Okay. And they actually do have a unit of measure set for this. And just so you can see, right now they have each to case, and you can edit that or you can add more to it, but we're not going to fool with that. I just wanted you to see how it was set up. Here's our cost per each, and then the cost of goods sold account is here, is just showing as just a plain cost of goods sold, which is fine. It's not subcategorized. It doesn't really need to be for our purposes. And then our preferred vendor, they have that listed. Now, we can set our sales price in here if we wanted to, say like maybe we sell those at $5 a piece, or just depending on, and it could change depending on whichever customer you're using or something like that. So you can just leave that blank and insert it in the invoice as you send it out. This is a taxable item, as you can see here. So again, you can choose between taxable sales and non-taxable, but this is taxable, which means any sales tax that you have, any sales tax items that you have will be computed on any of these that you sell. And as you can see, the income account that this is assigned to is construction income as the main heading, and then design income as the subcategory. So you can use this item when you're ordering the new parts and when you're selling those parts either separately or as part of a package to a customer. And then you come down to the bottom here and you can see that inventory information. Now, when you're setting this up from scratch, you really do not want to enter your quantity on hand or anything like that when you're doing this in here. You want to actually use your invoice. You want to set up the item first, and then you want to use your invoicing or standard workflows through QuickBooks to record those. But you can go ahead and put a reorder point, and what that means is that you'll be prompted when you reach that amount in your QuickBooks file that it's time for you to reorder so you don't run out. And then the asset account that's recorded to, again, is the other current asset. So that's it's linked to the inventory asset, other current asset. So that actually shows up on your reports and things like that. So that's the main difference in all that. But when you're setting this up, like I said, you want to make sure you have the double-sided items entered correctly. And then you also want to make sure you tie it to the correct asset account, which means if you don't have the inventory and the inventory asset should be set up when you turn that on in your preferences, which you would do that. You would go to Edit, Preferences, and Items and Inventory. And then under Company Preferences, you have to make sure all that's turned on here, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that. Let's do that again so you can see Edit, Preferences, and items in inventory is a company preference, and that's where you turn all that on, okay? So if you don't have all that turned on in your QuickBooks file, then you're not going to be able to do this. So if you notice that you don't see any of this when you're setting up inventory in your file, then that means you don't have the preferences set. So let's go ahead and exit out of that. And then we also have what we call a non-inventory part. This is inventory that it may be pass-through inventory, or it may be inventory that you just count outside of QuickBooks, or that you buy in bulk and that you really can't count per se. An example that would be lumber. So here we go. We're going to look at, we've got 3 types of lumber. We've got trim, decking, and rough. And I'm going to go ahead and double click on the decking lumber one here. So you can see basically it's the same type of thing. You've got it set up with the sub item of lumber. And I'll click on that so you can see how it's set up in here. This item again is used in assemblies or is purchased for a specific customer or job. Again, you can tie it to an expense account, which we have job materials, which is a cost of goods sold for the purchase side, and then for the income account side, we've got design income is that. And then again, we can set up our costs that we pay, and then we can set up the price that we charge the customer here. But if it's going to change on a frequent basis, it's just best to leave it blank, so that way you can enter it at the time you do the invoice. And then you also have to set up whether or not it's a tax or non-tax item, if you want to use units of measure, but on some of these things it's kind of difficult to do, so that's left blank. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier is that if you have an item that is no longer made or something like that, and you want to inactivate it, then you can go ahead and click on this little check mark right here, and that'll inactivate it out of your items list. And we're not going to do that with this. I just wanted you to see that that was there. So for non-inventory part, that's how you set it up. And we're going to go ahead. And then if you want to have a manufacturer's part number, you can put that in there too as well. So I'm going to click OK on that. And then we go down to the bottom of the lists. We have an other charge, which this can be your freight and different things like that. You can also use it to record deposits and things like that. So let's look at those real quick and see how they're set up. So this is not a double-sided item. This is basically used for when we're doing our income. We bill the customer for that, and that's part of that. That's a separate line item under income. So, and it's non-taxable, and that's going to vary in cost. So we leave that at 0. And then we also have a deposit. So let's double click on that so you can see how that is figured out. And it's just its own separate line item. And again, the account it's under construction income, just under the main heading there. So if you have a customer that provides a deposit and you want to record that as a deposit, then that would be the line item you would use. So we'll go ahead and click on OK to get out of that. And then there's also some other things, a bad debt, reimbursement, things like that. You can also create a subtotal category, which you can use throughout either an invoice or a bill. And let's see how those are set up. We'll double click on that. And when you're setting that up, you basically choose the type and then you can name it whatever you want. And that's basically really simple. And it tells you how it's used, which in this case, it's used to total all items above it on a form up to the last subtotal. And it's useful for applying a percentage discount or surcharge to many items. So that's where that would come in handy. And then here's another subtotal, which is basically a different subtotal. It basically works the same, but it's used in another part of the document there. So you can create as many of those as you need. Now groups are pretty cool, and we're going to create a group real quick. It's just going to be a basic group. So groups are really fun. Let's go ahead, and if you want to do a new item, you go down here to the bottom and click on this list arrow and click on new. And we want to make a group. And what a group is like just think of like a package of services that you provide that you don't want to have to enter 10 or 12 items in. You can just create the group and enter it all in at once. So we're going to call this one package. Actually, we're going to call it door package or cabinet package. And then you can choose whether you want to print the items in group or not. But we're just going to pick those things that are included in the cabinet. We got the cabinet pulls, and then we also have the light pine cabinets. And then you might, if there's anything else you want to put in there, and then if you want to put in there the quantities and all that, you would set that up as well. And then you can type the description here. This would be our standard cabinet. And then we're just not even going to bother with printing the items in the group, because sometimes you don't want them to see all the details and it just makes your invoice cleaner and everything. So we'll go ahead and click on OK. And I'm going to switch back to our home page real quick because we're going to go ahead and invoice somebody for this real quick, and it's not going to take very long to do. So we're going to create an invoice. And let's say we want to invoice Christy for the kitchen job here. And we're going to ignore that because we're just going to exclude all the billable time and costs at this time, because that's not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is we're just going to go ahead and go down here to our, and you can actually start typing this into the cabinet package, and there you go. And of course you can see that in this invoice, but if you want to preview it, you'll see here that our standard cabinet package, and we've got that without all those items listed, and it figures out the sales tax and all that, and balance due for just that. Isn't that neat? So if you've got a list of several things, and we're not going to save this, I'm just going to go ahead and exit out of that. No, I don't want to record it now. But as you can see, that's how that works. I'm going to go back to my open windows and access my items list again because it's still open. It's just hidden from everything. So that's how a group works. And you can actually, if you wanted to list all those items, say if you wanted to list all those items, you can actually create a different group. And a way to do that would be to duplicate this. As you can see up here, it has dupe in the front. And then we can do cabinet package, itemize. And then we click on print items and group. And then OK. And so let's go back to our home and do another invoice for that. Same customer, the kitchen. Remember, we're going to ignore all that for now. And we're going to go ahead and type cabinet, package, itemized. And I spelled that wrong, but you get the idea. So you can, just remember that as you're doing this invoice, you can see the items listed, even if you've got it checked that you can't see the items listed until you go into preview. Now, since we have this set up as itemized, we're going to go into preview, and now you can see that we've got each of those listed. See? And then there's no rate in there. We didn't put a rate in there. So, and you could have added the rate to this before you did all that. So I'm not going to save that. Hopefully that all makes sense. But you can do it either way. If they need an itemized listing of all the different components and the prices for each individual thing, then you can do that. So I'm going to switch back to the items list again. And then we have our discount, which is always going to show up as a negative. And if you have a standard discount that you do, then you can put that in there, or you can leave that blank. And again, you tie that to your chart of accounts item here. It's less discounts given. It's always going to show up negative on your thing. And it's all your reports and stuff and invoices and things. And then it's a non-taxable item generally. So, and then if you want to do a category for payment received, this is for like if a customer puts a down payment on there, and then you can choose which payment method, and then you can group with other undeposited funds or deposit directly. If you're using undeposited funds as a catch-all before you actually record deposits in your thing, that's the standard workflow that QuickBooks recommends you do. And then we get down to the sales tax, and depending on what area of the company you're in, you may have a city sales tax, or you may have a local option sales tax. So this is where you actually figure all those. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this one for East Bayshore for the city sales tax, so you can see how it's done. Again, you can set that up by choosing whatever type. You put the name, you put the description, you type the tax rate, and then you can actually choose the vendor that you collect for, and you need to have those set up in your chart of accounts. I mean, in your vendor center before you actually set that up. So you need to have your vendor list all set up with all those entities in there before you do it. Same thing with our San Domingo. This is for State Board of Education or equalization. You got to make sure you have all that set up. So in Georgia, for example, I live in what they call Cobb County, and our state income tax is 4%, but we have a local option sales tax of 1%, which means you have to account for those entities separately, which is why you would have probably at least 2 categories to do that. And then you also have a sales tax group, which is basically similar to, and that would be what I would do for my county, is I would collect for the state, and then for the it's actually for the Board of Education that we collect the additional ones, since it's a local option sales tax. So anyway, that is our quick and dirty preview and explanation of how to set up your items. I hope this is helpful, and I look forward to moving on to the next topic at hand, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Take care.